I know we're almost halfway through the season already, but for the first time from Seattle, Utah, welcome to the NHL. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where for the second game in a row, the Kraken score 5 points, get 2 points in the standings, and this time, they didn't even need a miracle comeback to make it happen, as they defeat the Utah Hockey Club in the first meeting between the two teams since the move to Utah from Arizona, 5-2, a regulation win for the Kraken, and one that it wasn't necessarily always the best, but certainly a much better full 60 minutes from the Kraken than what we saw a couple days before. Though once again capped off by a pretty good third period. Actually, the game got off to a pretty similar start to the game in Vancouver as well. The Kraken come out of the gates playing pretty well early on in the first period, with Grubauer again in net, Decord still not ready from taking that puck off the inside of the arm before going into the break in Colorado. The only change in the lineup being that Burakovsky is back in after being out from an illness for the previous game, so he wasn't a healthy scratch. He was, definitely a bit sick and couldn't play in that game. So Sprong out, Burakovsky in, and that line would get a little bit of a change as the line of Stevenson, McCann, and Burakovsky got a bit caved in as this game went along, and they made a little bit of a change to swap Burakovsky and Bjorkstrand in the third period, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. As far as the first period is concerned, the Kraken, again, get off to a pretty good start, outshooting Utah 7-1 just a few minutes into the game, but around the halfway point of the first period, Utah will get the first power play of the game, and just like Vancouver a couple days ago, they are able to score on it to open things up. It's a play that they had tried just before. The Kraken were able to clear the puck once, but Utah back into the offensive end about halfway through the power play. One cycle sees a one-time shot that Grubauer makes a save on. It goes out into the corner harmlessly, or actually it might have even gotten blocked by Larson. Either way, the Kraken get control of it. Larson has it. He gets it to Alexiak, and they just aren't able to get it out across the blue line. So Utah keeps it in, sets up the same play, cycles a couple of players to change who's taking the one-timer. This time, it's Logan Cooley. He fires off the shot. It goes off the inside of Grubauer's leg and into the back of the net through the 5-hole to give Utah the 1-0 lead. At first, I thought that Larson might have gotten a piece of this shot from Cooley, and that redirection is what ends up beating Grubauer. But really, it was just a play that Grubauer doesn't read particularly well. He overcommits back towards the middle as Keller and Cooley switch places, Keller having taken the first one-timer from basically the same spot that Cooley ends up scoring here. So then when the pass goes right back to Cooley for that same one-timer from Keller, Grubauer has to lunge back to the side, and that opens up the 5-hole wide open, which is where the puck goes right through, off the inside of his leg, and into the net. And then not long after, they nearly make it 2-0 as another puck gets past Grubauer, but Dunn's able to rescue that one and shuffle it out to safety. Then the Kraken finally are able to start getting things going again as they get a couple of power plays, which, although the first one doesn't score, it does have quite a few pretty good chances. The Kraken really moving the puck very well on this power play, getting it up into some dangerous areas, getting good looks, even having some traffic in front of the net. But they just pretty much do everything on this power play short of actually getting it into the net past Vejmelka. So Utah is able to kill that off. Then the Kraken get another power play. Once again, some good movement, getting guys to the net. And about halfway through, maybe even 3/4 of the way through the power play, a pass from Stevenson down to Schwartz below the faceoff circle. Schwartz, with his back to the net, goes forehand to backhand and then just chips the puck over the shoulder and into the near side of the net from a tight angle to give the Kraken the power play goal, equaling or answering the power play goal from Utah a little bit earlier. Or at least so we thought for actually a couple of minutes, as the celebration for the Kraken on this power play goal was interrupted by sheer chaos breaking out along the boards. As the Kraken are going to do the high five line at the bench, Stevenson goes to say something to someone, and that just turns into fisticuffs between basically everybody on the ice, which, at that point, Utah's still outnumbered, so I don't really know why you're picking a fight. Though maybe Stevenson kind of was the one picking the fight. Either way, there's a bunch of punches being thrown. In the end, 4 more players end up going to the box to join the one guy that was already there for that power play. And it turns out that that wasn't the only thing that was slowing things down and causing this interruption, as Utah also used that time to look at their pads and figure out that the Kraken had been offside. In fact, it was Jaden Schwartz who had been offside. They challenge it, and sure enough, this one comes off the board. So, yeah, it's one of those where I mean, technically it's offside, and that's how the Kraken entered the zone, but they had been in the offensive zone for an extended period of time. That wasn't an egregious offside. Schwartz was barely offside to get this puck into the offensive end, and it's not like the Kraken only got into the offensive end because of the offside from Schwartz here. And like I said, it had been in the offensive end for quite a while before the goal actually happens. The puck had been moving around. It really didn't affect the play all that much, but the rule is the rule, and Schwartz was offside, so it comes off. The Kraken aren't able to score on the rest of this power play in spite of a couple more pretty good opportunities, so we get into the last couple minutes with Utah still having the 1-0 lead, in spite of the Kraken really having controlled this first period for the majority of it, pretty much outside of that Utah power play in a minute or so that followed. But the Kraken don't let that, or the frustration of seeing a goal come off the board, and a pretty nice goal at that, get to them or cause their momentum to wane in any way, as coming out of those power plays with just a couple minutes left in the first period, down that one goal, eventually their offensive pressure ends up mattering on the scoreboard. As under 2 minutes left, they get back into the offensive end. It's the fourth line that gets in on a good forecheck. A shot from Riker Evans is saved by Vejmelka, but it bounces out to the far side where Yanni Gourde is waiting. It gets right to him. He fires off the shot before either Vejmelka or another diving defenseman for Utah can get back in time. They have kind of a fun little synchronized dive to try in desperation get a hand or foot in front of it. Neither one are able to, though. It finds the back of the net. Gourde gets the goal, and this one will end up counting as the Kraken have tied things up. And as far as points are concerned, although Schwartz had the goal taken off the board, he does get the secondary assist on the scored goal, so he still gets right back on the score sheet here as he stays hot coming out of that game in Vancouver. And then he gets right back on the score sheet again when under a minute later, the Kraken come rushing into the offensive end. Once again, it's Schwartz between changes out there with a line that isn't his own, firing off a puck towards the net. He said he was kind of flat-footed and just trying to throw the puck at the net, hoping for something good to happen. He saw Burakovsky had gotten in front of it. Sure enough, that's where Burakovsky was, getting right out into the low slot. And it's a beautiful hands-eye coordination play by Burakovsky here to get his stick on the airborne puck and redirect it straight to the 5-hole and into the back of the net past Vejmelka to give the Kraken the 2-1 lead going into the intermission, where just a minute ago they were down 1-0. Now, as for the second period, well, again, kind of like the game in Vancouver, the middle 20 minutes were certainly the worst for the Kraken, and this time they don't even start off well like they did the second period in Vancouver. With that being said, as a whole, the Kraken played a much better full 60 minutes in this game than they did in Vancouver. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But as far as this game is concerned, the second period was the one that the Kraken kind of just had to survive. It was very much a bend but don't break second period for them, and it helps that they didn't send Utah to any more power plays, which was also helped by the fact that the refs were just swallowing their whistles all night long. But Utah really does get back in the game as far as the offensive zone time stats, shots on goal certainly. They were spending most of the time with the puck and really making Grubauer work, which he was doing a fantastic job of. I can't really even think of any big specific highlight reel, diving, lunging saves or anything like that over the course of it. He just was reading things well, getting to it, and that's not to say that Utah was only getting shots off from the outside. There were some shots from dangerous areas that they were able to get off on him. He just was on top of his game, especially here in this middle frame, which is good because the Kraken were, again, making sure that he was getting his work in this middle 20 minutes. I suppose the one thing I would say the Kraken were doing pretty well defensively and consistently doing it well throughout the course of the second period, even if they were playing a little bit too much defense for most of our liking throughout the course of the middle 20 minutes. They were doing a pretty good job of keeping the front of the net clean, really not allowing Utah to get very much net front presence. So although they were getting some shots from fairly in tight, a little bit closer than you'd like to see, not all the shots coming from the outside, they weren't getting much as far as screens or ability to pick up rebounds. Grubauer was allowing some rebounds here and there. If you really wanted to nitpick things, that might be something you'd like to see cleaned up a little bit. But even at that, he was controlling the rebounds pretty well over the course of the second period, and without any extra Utah players around the net, that makes his ability to get those rebounds safely to his own teammates a lot easier. But unfortunately, although the bend but don't break defensive approach for the Kraken worked almost throughout the entire second period, they bend a little bit more, and then bend just a little bit too much, and it snaps and breaks right at the last minute mark of this second period. Utah gets one more zone entry as we cross the minute mark, or minute left in the second. A shot from one side gets rebounded out to the other. Grubauer doesn't really control this one particularly well, or just doesn't see Kerfoot on the far side. And much like how the Kraken scored their first official goal that counted, with the Evans shot rebounding out to the far side for Gord to score, this shot rebounds out to the far side for Kerfoot. He puts it past Grubauer without really much Grubauer can do on that rebound shot, and Utah ties things up as we go into the second intermission. And then the third period is once again a pretty back and forth third period. Unlike the one in Vancouver, though, it's a much more eventful third period. It also helps that the opposing team doesn't score early on, where Vancouver extended the lead that they already had going into it early on in that one. Utah doesn't even have a lead coming in, and they aren't able to score early. And eventually, a few minutes in, it's the Kraken who end up taking the lead off of a beautiful breakout pass from Kakko. He gets the puck along the boards right around the faceoff dot in the Kraken end. He said so after the game that he could hear Schwartz tapping his stick from the far end of the ice and hear the crowd's excitement, and maybe even heard someone yelling to pass the puck, which probably would have been one of his own teammates. It's not terribly likely he would have heard a specific fan through the boards. Either way, he makes a beautiful pass from midway down deep in the Kraken end, all the way through the neutral zone, through the legs of a Utah player at the Kraken blue line, all the way to the far blue line, hitting Schwartz in stride. Schwartz doesn't have a Utah player within 10, 15, maybe even 20 feet of him. I think the closest guy to him when he gets this puck is still at center ice. So Schwartz has all the time in the world to skate in on the breakaway. And there's times on breakaways, especially if it's a guy that's a bit snake bit, or just has had a hard time scoring, maybe a guy that doesn't have a fantastic shot, you just have a feeling that it's going to find a way to stay out of the net, either a very nice save, or maybe they'll miss the net entirely. Whatever the case is, there's times where you don't feel great about a score on a breakaway, even if you're getting excited about the possibility. And then there's breakaways like this one with Jaden Schwartz, who is red hot offensively lately, especially coming out of that game in Vancouver. But even during the losing streak, he was one of the better offensive producers for the Kraken. It's one where, as he skates in with all the time in the world, you just knew that somehow, some way, this puck was finding its way into the net. And sure enough, he skates in and puts it right to the 5-hole and into the net past Vejmelka to give the Kraken the 3-2 lead for Schwartz, getting back the goal that he had taken away from him on that first period power play. Now, coming out of the Kraken taking the lead here, Utah does try to respond, and they're nearly able to, as a puck somewhere in this time frame anyway gets through Philip Grubauer, one of the couple that leaked through him that the Kraken catch a bit of a break on, as Kerfoot gets to the loose puck behind Grubauer and then just shovels it wide of the net out to safety. So we all breathe a huge sigh of relief, say our thanks to Kerfoot for not putting it into the net for the second time in the game. The Kraken survive that, and a couple minutes later, once again, it's Kakko, though this time from farther down the ice. He gets the puck from Vince Dunn through the neutral zone at the opposing blue line, where he sees Matty Beniers with speed coming down the middle of the ice, throws it into the middle of the wide open offensive end. Beniers is the first one to it, alone on his own breakaway, with a little bit less time and space than Schwartz had, it has to be said. He skates in, goes to fire off the shot, and then just, well, you know what I was saying about a guy who's been a little bit more snake-bitten lately on a breakaway? Well, as Beniers goes to fire off this shot from in tight on the breakaway, it just at the last second rolls off the end of the blade of his stick and goes harmlessly wide of the net, out behind it, kind of into the corner of the trapezoid area behind the net, right up against the boards. Beniers is able to get to it first, but he's not going to be able to score from there. Unfortunately, this breakaway just doesn't end up working out for him after he had been pretty much robbed on a couple of pretty good chances in the first period. And then I don't know whether it was out of frustration at everything that's been going on for him, at least offensively so far this season, especially the 20-game goalless drought that he just broke in Vancouver with that somewhat fluky goal from just inside the blue line that goes off the glove of Demko and into the net, which maybe you thought might spring something offensively. Maybe that gets the monkey off his back a little bit, but now he's had a few more golden opportunities to score in this game that, just like in that goalless drought, just would not go into the net. Capped off with this flubbed opportunity on the breakaway. So maybe it was frustration, maybe it was just trying to make something out of nothing, but Beniers gets to that puck behind the net and then just flings it back out the front of the net, basically right into Vejmelka, who's got the side of the net closed off, or at least he thought so anyway, as the puck goes off the side of the net under one skate of Vejmelka, then off his far leg, the inside of his far leg, which is still in front of the net, and then across the goal line to give Beniers the goal anyway. It's not how you typically score a breakaway goal, but Beniers finds a way, and a little bit of luck for the second game in a row. It's also the second game in a row now that a Kraken player has scored in the back half of a third period from behind the goal line. But either way, it gives the Kraken the 4-2 lead. Kakko picks up his second primary assist in just a few minutes. And from here, the Kraken would be able to close things out. They don't allow a big comeback to happen against them right after doing it to the Canucks. I mean, Utah does get a couple chances in the late part of the game. Eventually, they go empty net with a little over 3 minutes left, and a couple minutes into the 6-on-5, Bjorkstrand is able to set McCann loose on a breakaway. McCann skates away from Kerfoot and puts it into the empty net to give the Kraken the 5-2 lead. And just as a quick aside, normally I wouldn't bother mentioning or probably even remembering what opposing player or Kraken player was skating away from to score an easy empty net goal at the end of a game that really had no impact on the outcome of the game, other than I suppose really icing the game away and making it obvious the Kraken were going to win and not find some way to choke away a 2-goal lead in a minute and a half. But for whatever reason in my memory that sometimes can only remember unnecessary, inane facts from years past and then not remember things that are actually important to me in the present day, well, as it turns out, Kerfoot is the player that, although he now plays for Utah and played for Arizona last year, at the time was with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's the guy that the Maple Leafs specifically traded with Pittsburgh to get McCann from so that they could expose McCann and protect Kerfoot in the expansion draft. And sure enough, that's just what happened. They exposed McCann, the Kraken took the bait, took McCann, and now here we are. Kerfoot's playing for a different team, and McCann's skating away from him for an empty net goal. Again, it didn't have an impact on the game, but it was just something that popped into my mind in that moment in time. Somewhat fittingly, McCann scoring a goal for the Kraken as he has been, well, certainly at the very least the offensive MVP, if not the overall MVP of this franchise since day one. Anyway, as far as the game is concerned, again, a good win for the Kraken, 5-2 over Utah in the first meeting between the two teams. So the Kraken now undefeated in their history against teams from Utah. Hopefully that can continue to last throughout the rest of the season. That would give the Kraken 2 more wins, at least on the rest of the schedule, if they can keep that up. Either way, it's just good to see that the Kraken can play a little bit more of a full 60 minutes and get a more normal win than what we saw in Vancouver, as exciting as that game was. It's nice to see the Kraken not just rely on a comeback in the last 5 minutes of a game or really have to have a comeback at all past, I suppose, the end of the first period where they came back from 1 down and scored twice there in the end of the first. It still had its moments where the Kraken could have played it better. The second period was a lot of bending and a little bit of a break at the end. But I suppose at the very least, on the other hand, with that second period, if you want to give Utah the credit, which they definitely deserve of playing that second period well, the Kraken were able to weather that storm and play pretty well defensively to keep Utah off the board. And maybe it's also worth mentioning that Utah scores that goal on a rush down into the offensive end after Gord had his stick pulled out of his hands. So maybe a non-call there. There is also Tanev coming in to lay a bit of a late hit. So I guess kind of 2 non-calls, 1 each way on the course of that play going down into the Kraken end for that second Utah goal. Again, their officials in this game really swallowed their whistles past the first few penalties they had there in the first period. There was a lot that they let go, and maybe at times let the game get a little bit away from them as far as the chippiness that really did remain between these two teams, even after that fracas that was kind of the highlight of it in the first period. Even through that and the second period that didn't necessarily go the way you'd like it to for the Kraken. They played a good first period and had good moments certainly in the third. You have to really like what you're starting to see out of this Kakko, Beniers, Schwartz line. Obviously Schwartz is red hot, but Beniers and Kakko really seem to be connecting pretty well. And you can see every game Kakko takes another step in learning the team and learning his line mates more and more. And well, it certainly showed up with those 2 breakout passes to both Schwartz and then Beniers there in the middle part of that third period. They got the Kraken the lead and then extended the lead with a little bit of help from the lucky finish there from Beniers. Of course, at the same time, it's a really good thing that that line is clicking because the line just below it, or the line that I think is supposed to be the second line in Stevenson, McCann, and Burakovsky, I mean, like I mentioned in the beginning, got absolutely caved in this game. Shot attempts, they got out attempted 3-19. And as far as expected goals are concerned, depending on where you look, they gave up more than an expected goal in this game just by their line and barely got 1/10 of an expected goal back the other way. So not great from that group, it's been a tough run for them, but you're getting good performances out of, well, specifically the fourth line of Gord, Tanev, and Cartier was, well, let's just say it was easily the second best line for the Kraken in this game. And it's nice that the Kraken once again have 4 lines that even if you have one line like the Stevenson line in this game that is really having an off game, then you've got three others that can help pick up that slack. Certainly most of that coming from Benir's line with Kakko and Schwartz. But again, the Gord line also helping out quite a bit. The other thing the Gord line I want to mention did very well in this game that we didn't see very much of, and I mentioned the Kraken really didn't do much of this in that game in Vancouver, was they got massively out-hit and just out-physicaled in that game. They kind of turned that back the other way on Utah in this one. The Kraken had some pretty big hits, especially in the first period. It seemed like they came out to prove that they weren't just going to get pushed around like they did throughout big portions of that game against the Canucks. So it's nice to see that they at least responded to that aspect of the game, and it seemed like especially the fourth line was trying to make a point that they weren't just going to get pushed around. Anyway, all that to say, hopefully the Kraken can keep this up as they will host that same Vancouver Canucks team in just a few days' time on the 2nd on Thursday, which it sounds like the Kraken are going to catch a bit of a break as both Pettersson and Hughes will once again be out. Pettersson, it sounded like, would already been out anyway, but now the Hughes injury, which was day-to-day, has been moved to week the last I saw. So yeah, the Kraken catching a bit of a break that they're getting Vancouver at a time where that D-core is pretty bad, and hopefully this time they can take a little bit more advantage of that before the final 5 minutes of a game. Before we can get to that, though, we have to close this one out with the Kraken 3 stars. As always, brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help decide the 3 stars after any of these Kraken games, especially the wins, you can help support a little bit more than you already are by watching at this point, which I very much appreciate, by going to the link down below and supporting on Patreon as well. Patreon and none of us really disagree with the official 3 stars. It's one of those games where it seems like the official 3 stars they got right, not only in which 3 players they picked, but also the order. So in case you haven't seen who those are, the first star I really don't think will come as much of a surprise. It has to be Jaden Schwartz. He has a goal and 2 assists in this game, plus the goal that got taken off the board on that power play. Was the prettiest goal of the game. It's just the one that didn't count. That quick backhand chip shot from a tight angle that went in. Either way, another fantastic game from Schwartz. Helps that his line is playing very well around him as well, but he is clearly the offensive driving force coming out of that Christmas break to this point. Then the second star, Kaapo Kakko, with those 2 very nice assists, especially that first one, that he threads the needle through the legs of one Utah player past another one and finds Schwartz all alone on the opposing blue line. At least 100-foot pass, if not more, a 100-plus foot pass that he sets Schwartz loose on that breakaway for the goal that he got that actually did count. And then just a couple minutes later finds Benir's for that breakaway, which eventually found its way into the net. And besides that, had a couple other pretty nice plays in this game. A few shots from in tight that he wasn't able to get one to go, but the way he's playing, he's going to start scoring goals on top of the assists that he's already starting to put up. And then the third star, with 28 saves on 30 shots, it's Philip Grubauer, a .933 save percentage, and some stats that start to look a little bit more like how he's actually playing in net. Even if he did get away with a couple, the one that Dunn is able to push to the side that got past him on a rebound, and then the one that got through him that Kerfoot got to and just pushed out of the net to safety as well. Either way, Grubauer really was fantastic, especially in that second period, keeping the Kraken in this game and making sure that even when one did eventually get past him right at the end of the second period, that only tied the game and still gave the Kraken a chance to win it in the third, which they were more than able to do. A great game from Grubauer, especially as he's, I think, kind of just playing it day by day to wait and see when Decord could come back. And so far, so good. He's, again, proving to be, at the very least, a very good 1B option. And it also certainly helps for him when the team decides to score more than 1 or 2 goals back the other way. And the way things have gone for him this season as far as goal support is concerned, 1 or 2 isn't even necessarily been a given. Other than that, though, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comment section below about this game, who your 3 stars would be, if there's some other guys I didn't mention. A couple others that were mentioned on Patreon that I also thought were worth shouting out would be Yanni Gord and obviously Matty Beniers with the goal. Both of them had goals, but both of them played fantastic games otherwise. Gord had a couple other pretty good chances to score, and I already mentioned that Beniers did in the first period. I also thought Adam Larsson played quietly a pretty good game as well that shouldn't go without mention. So some other candidates as well, but I'm not going to disagree with the official 3 stars. Let me know what you think and how we're feeling about the Kraken getting a rematch with the Canucks. We'll see how that game goes and what the Canucks' response to that is possibly going to be after, well, the embarrassment that they had on home ice. Until then, though, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.